In this edition of Art Rocks, a painter expresses the exuberance of Louisiana culture.
You know, I've traveled all across the country, and I'm not just saying it's biased, but the culture here is unlike any other.
We visit a living memorial to the Holocaust.
This is not an exhibition that's about death. It's about life and death. It's about the past, and it makes you think about the future.
Sounds of the past delight modern audiences.
To me, that's art, is creating something that changes the way that people look at the world.
And meet a true Renaissance man and all his creations.
It's like being a detective. You keep the heat on till the steel talks.
It's all ahead on this edition of Art Rocks.
Art Rocks is made possible by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and by viewers like you.
Hello, I'm James Fox Smith, publisher of Country Roads magazine, and this is Art Rocks. In our first segment, Donna Bernard found it hard to envisage painting as a career. Fortunately, he found an artistic mentor in the late George Rodrigue, and that led him to choose the path of the artist.
My name's Donna Bernard, and I'm from Lafayette, Louisiana. Been painting for 30 years. My favorite medium to work in is oils and acrylic. Sometimes when I go to sleep, ideas in my head keep clicking. And so, man, I have to wake up, run back here in my studio and write it down, what I'm thinking, because I don't want to forget about it because it's a great idea. I started taking art class in high school and found it fascinating. I enjoyed it. I thought it would be a hobby that you go get a regular job and then you become, you just do this as a hobby. And started in commercial art in the early 80s for Lamar Advertising, hand painting billboards. That was way before they digitized everything. Met a very famous local artist. Working full time with him and sitting with him, next to him, watching him paint, every day. Just learned from that and started learning the business, traveling with him. Still work full time for George. I'm very grateful. He's a great mentor. He's taught me a lot. His knowledge on art and art history is just so good, and composition, what he knows about composition and color and tint and all that, and just led me to eventually win the Louisiana Duck Stamp in '07. I've traveled with Rodrigue, all across the country, and I truly, I'm not just saying it's biased, but the culture here is unlike any other. The people here are friendly. Festivals and the food is just unsurpassing. That inspires me to put that back into my art, whether I'm doing a landscape with bright colors or just wildlife, because of the sportsmen around here, fishing and hunting. There's just a way of life, over here, and we have so much great culture and resources here in Louisiana that it all adds up and inspires me to do what I do.
Now, let's take a look at some of Louisiana's arts and cultural events in the coming week. For more information on these events, visit our website at lpb.org/artrocks. And to find more arts activities, check out countryroadsmag.com. Up next, we visit the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York City. We take a look at its core exhibit, which provides an intimate appreciation for the artistic talents and drive of those living in Nazi concentration camps during the Holocaust.
My name is David Marwell, and I'm the director of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. The original building of the museum was completed in 1997, and the Robert M. Morgenthau Wing was completed in September 2003. Our mission is to teach people of all ages and backgrounds about 20th and 21st century Jewish history and the Holocaust. The core exhibition, which is composed of 3 floors, the first floor, without any foreshadowing, talks about life before the Holocaust, beginning in about 1880 with a great migration of Jews. The second floor deals with the Holocaust itself. And the third floor deals with this remarkable story of the rebirth of life and community following great tragedy. The first thing that a visitor sees when they enter our core exhibition is 2 quotes from the Bible. This is not an exhibition that's about death. It's about life and death. It's about the past, and it makes you think about the future because of the hope that it inspires. We tell this history from a Jewish perspective. So instead of saying, this is what the Nazis did to the Jews, which is the narrative structure of many Holocaust museums, our narrative structure is, this is what happened to me, to my family, to my community, to my people. So the story is told in the first person through the testimony of individuals who lived the history. Anyone dealing with Holocaust education has to confront the time which is coming within the next decade or 2, when there will be no one left alive who experienced the events of the Holocaust themselves. The gallery educators that our visitors encounter here, many of them are survivors, and that gives tremendous power to the way we approach this history. Then there are also objects. These are a different kind of survivor. People come face to face with objects that were important to individuals at the time of the history we're telling. And they can look at that object and imagine the role it played and lend to it their own sense of empathy. We have, for instance, the trumpet that was played by a Dutch musician named Louis Bennett. He played this in the orchestra at Auschwitz, and it saved his life. And you can imagine it in his hands. You can imagine him blowing through the mouthpiece and understand the role that that played in saving him. Any museum that deals with the Holocaust has to approach the question of the scale of what happened. We have, thanks to the very careful, creative, and passionate work of a French Jewish lawyer named Serge Klarsfeld, the photographs of some 2,000 individuals who were deported from France to Auschwitz, most of whom died. There are 6 pillars, and each one has several hundred photographs on them. And we have a book that allows you to locate that person's name. And it's very important for the public to see these people not as victims, but as living people with varied and vibrant lives. And by showing that, you have some way of getting at, approaching, hinting at the impact of the Holocaust, because you're not simply seeing the number 6 million, you're seeing a small sample of that 6 million, but in the context of their lives. The Voices of Liberty is one of my favorite installations at the museum. It's located on the 3rd floor of the museum, and one can see the Statue of Liberty out in the harbor. And we said, what if we allowed the public to take in this view, but at the same time, hear stories of people seeing the Statue of Liberty for the first time?
What I really remember very vividly is the mist, and mysteriously the Statue of Liberty just appearing as a colossus.
It was freedom. It was beautiful.
My mother broke out the first pair of long pants so I would not get off the ship in lederhosen.
The only country I was accepted in was here, and it's a beautiful country.
Even though much of it is about the Jewish experience, the Voices of Liberty tells a completely universal story about leaving home and coming to a new place. The Garden of Stones is an art installation by Andy Goldsworthy, the great British artist. It's composed of 18 large boulders. The largest one, I think, weighed 30,000 pounds when it was first brought here. Each of the stones has been hollowed out, filled with earth, and from each stone, a dwarf chestnut oak tree grows. The metaphor here is that life can take root and flourish even in the most unforgiving and unlikely circumstances. We conceive of this museum as a living memorial because what we do each day is to teach people and to provide a place where people can come, learn, reflect, and contemplate an important and difficult history within the context of the history that came before and after.
For more information, visit mjhnyc.org. Baroque music may have its roots in the 17th century, but the Baroque Chamber Orchestra of Colorado is firmly planted in the present. These musicians, while keeping true to tradition, are unmistakably current. We sat down with some of the orchestra members and learned what makes them tick.
The way that the violin functions in a Baroque ensemble is more like being the lead guitarist in a band. The harpsichord and the cello and sometimes the guitar or lute, or they sort of create the chords and the rhythm, and you get to solo. I think sometimes people think of Baroque music as a certain kind of thing, like Vivaldi or Handel, and I love that music, but it's also, there's a different way that the instruments function, and there's a different way that the ensembles function, and that's what really drew me to it.
I consider it a modern art form, that what we do. It's really mostly about emotion and about conveying emotions, and the performer's job, actually, in Baroque times, was to move the audience to feel something. There's really an element of improvisation in this music. The performer would not just play something that was on the page. In fact, the composer would write very minimal things on the page and would expect the performer to just take it and make it their own.
We know that if it says solo ad libitum, violinists were very good at making things up. So this is what I do there. Something like this. It changes every night. We call what we do performance practice, which means that when we play the music of a time period, we try to reenact that as closely as possible in terms of our equipment.
Every harpsichord is different. You actually have 3 sets of strings on this instrument, and the bottom keyboard plays 2 of those strings, and the top another set of strings. So you can play any of those by itself, or you can play them in different combinations. A couple things drew me to the harpsichord. It's really the music that led me there. So my love of Bach and my love of music from that period. But I have to admit also there's the element of novelty and doing something different. There are lots of keyboard players out there and a lot of piano players, but very few harpsichordists. So it's kind of a matter of pride that I'm one of a select few that play this instrument.
Sometimes I feel like I'm really creating something that speaks to people, and to me that's art, is creating something that changes the way that people look at the world.
Now it's time to celebrate another Louisiana treasure. This week we're exploring the old state capitol.
It's hard to miss this distinctive medieval-style castle overlooking the Mississippi River in Baton Rouge. The building once housed the Louisiana legislature from the mid-1800s until the current Art Deco Capitol building was built under the administration of Huey Long. Designed by New York architect James Dakin, the Gothic revival style of the old state capitol mixes Victorian and Gothic influences in a grand manner. Used by Union troops during the Civil War, the building suffered 2 fires, which left it an empty, gutted shell. The reconstruction in 1882 by architect and engineer William A. Ferret created a new focal point for the interior: an imposing cast-iron spiral staircase, and a stained glass cathedral dome. Today, this National Historic Landmark houses the Museum of Political History, which contains state-of-the-art immersive exhibits and attractions. The Old State Capitol also serves as a spectacular venue for special programs, lectures, and exhibits, and remains a Louisiana treasure.
Now, in our final segment, we meet Wisconsin artist and Renaissance man Bill Reid, whose metal creatures are anything but stiff. They move, some even fly, all are testaments to Reid's artistic talent and innovative mind. Take a look.
When you think about it, I'm wearing sunglasses, I'm in the dark, and I'm looking at this little flame. It's like being a detective. You keep the heat on till the steel talks, you know. It starts telling you stuff, and you listen, and it takes a lot of patience, because they take a lot of time to make. And just making up your own world. I think everybody wants to make up their own world. My name's Bill Reid. I'm a sculptor, and I live in Racine. I make things out of steel in general. I do painting too, and I usually paint the steel. And I like stories. I like making things. I really like that idea. So I actually did a little aluminum casting at the beginning and got into that whole type of thing. And then I went back to welding, like arc welding, big wire structures and big things. And for actually about 30 years now, I've been making things out of sheet metal, with wire cages, animals, and story-related things. I like that because you can do mechanical things with them. They can be really light, but they're really strong, and it gives me lots of opportunities. I think the story thing gives it an extra dimension of just being a sculpture. They often start with a pun, or it's usually just a sketch, but it's often based on words. I think the English language is so wacky, because how can pie be something good to eat and also this really cool number? And then there's pie rats too, making this honey badger in like a forest of pies, pie rats, and all sorts of goofy stuff. But I usually, if I'm starting a beast, I'll start with the trunk, the middle part, and build out. I'll build that, then do the head, then do the legs, usually put nice shoes on them, then do the arms, kind of build out from the center out, because that body just determines how big the whole thing's going to be. I might want to just start with an idea that I want to make a mechanical thing. I'll just make a little vehicle thing with the movement and then figure out what kind of creature to put on it. It's fun to do different stuff, I guess. I don't want to do the same thing over and over. I'm basically working with wire, really thin, like 1/8 inch usually, and sheet steel, 24 gauge steel. And I usually make a wire structure, usually with the silhouette. Like if I'm doing a fish, I'll do the silhouette of the fishy and then fill it in with the wire and then lay it on the sheet steel, draw the patterns, cut it out. And I use an oxyacetylene torch. It's seriously hot, but it's a really tiny little flame. And the nice thing is it's just steel to steel. I don't need flux or anything. It's just steel, and the steel wants to melt together. Steel is very friendly. When I'm ready to paint, what I'll do is I'll run the torch over it and knock off any scale. And then I bang it, actually, to really knock off anything else that's loose. And then I put a good primer on it to protect it from rusting. And then I actually use like hardware store water-based enamel paints. And they're nice, they don't have fumes, and you can really play with them almost like watercolor. You can do lots of layers. Kids ask me how many I've done. I must have done at least 4,000 sculptures, you know, because I've been doing over 100 a year for 35 years or something. It adds up. The last year or so, I've been doing bunions and Hawaiians. If you had an onion suit on, you'd be crying, right? So these are Hawaiian onions dressed up in bunnies or looking like bunnies and selling their tears on the street or carving up rainbows or, you know, trying to make a living somehow or another. So that's one of my favorite things of the last year. I did a big owl, like a really 6-foot-tall owl. He's got a big flamingo flying over the top of his head, and there's a crank, and the flamingo's wings go up and down. Also, I did another one with owls again, a little one, and it's 3 owls like they're migrating. So you turn the crank, and they're all going through, but their wings flap up and down. The bee-bomb was the most ambitious thing. The car is a legit road car. It was built on a 1988 Ford Escort, and it doesn't look anything like it, but it is certified to drive. That was probably my most ambitious project ever, just because I didn't mess anything up mechanically with it. The pedal cars are fun because they're bicycles. I love bicycles. They're simple, they're easy to fix, and they're fairly efficient. The first one I made, the Reedster, we actually made the frame. I had help from an engineer friend, but we made it from the frame up, total, even the frames made by hand and the kingpins and all that. And they used wheelbarrow tires, and I made it's a little anteater, and it goes along really nice. And then there's Moby, like a Moby Dick, the great white whale. Just trying to scare you. I like do something different. And there's something really goofy when you see these things moving through space instead of just another static sculpture or monument. To see them moving through the sky, through the air, is really, it's just a whole nother dimension to me. I think it's funny. I get a lot of, you must have a lot of time on your hands, but many people I think they get a smile out of them. It's kind of a different language. I try to learn from other things, what I think works in my mind. And the idea of finding things, a new story, new character, just, I mean, it's great to be alive and doing stuff fun like this, and I'm lucky.
To learn more about Bill Reid's art, visit his website, bbomb.com. And that's it for this edition of Art Rocks. Don't forget to visit the website at lpb.org/artrocks, where you'll find feature videos and information on upcoming arts events. So until next time, I'm James Fox Smith, and thanks for watching.